The silence of Earth's orbit was deceptive. From a distance, it shimmered like a peaceful sapphire against the black canvas of space. But closer inspection revealed scars, remnants of orbital debris, ruined satellites, and defense grids reforged in preparation for war. Humanity had learned the hard way that peace was never permanent. After centuries of division, climate collapse, and near extinction, the species had united not from hope, but from fear. Commander Nyx Virell stood alone on the observation deck of a UEC dreadnought Vigilant Requiem, her silhouette carved sharply against the glow of Earth below. Her armor, matte black and laced with iridescent circuitry, clung to her like a second skin. The void stared back at her, but she did not blink. She was the first of her kind, a product of Project Obsidian. Part soldier, part symbol, wholly uncompromising. Her breathing was slow and mechanical, calibrated to the rhythms of space and silence. Behind her, Admiral Saria Elen's voice cracked through the calm. They've entered Saturn's orbit. 13 vessels, Varn insignia confirmed. Nyx didn't turn. ETA to Earth's outer perimeter? 32 hours. Maybe less if they spool their cores. A pause. They didn't reply to our last transmission. They won't, not until they're above our skies. Nyx finally turned, the synthetic mesh of her hood falling back to reveal a face shaped more by code than childhood. Her eyes glowed faintly, not from any emotion, but from the interface laced into her retinas. They think we're afraid. Elen didn't argue. Humanity's history with alien life had been brief and brutal. First contact came 71 years ago, not with diplomacy, but with a Varn-cleansing vessel that burned New Mumbai to ash. What followed was less an invasion and more a test. Earth had been deemed irrelevant, primitive, unworthy of assimilation, but also too stubborn to be easily destroyed. So they had been warned, quarantined, and left behind. The galaxy moved on, while Earth stewed in its humiliation. But now the Varn had returned. In the shadowed depths of Earth's lunar archive, the Council of Nine had convened in a dome of obsidian glass. Leaders from every continent, elected, inherited, and appointed, sat in eerie stillness. No speeches, no pleas, only data, broadcast silently to each neural implant. Threat analysis, tactical probabilities, survival odds, 11.2%. The voice that broke the silence was dry, clinical. If we submit, the Varn may accept servitude over extinction. Nyx stood behind her seat, but did not sit. They won't, she said. Their philosophy is conquest through entropy. Servitude is a delayed tactic, not a mercy. Across the table, Chancellor Lin of the Pacific States adjusted his collar. And you suggest what? That we fight a species with star-forged weapons and time-folding drives with our scrap fleets and hope? No, Nyx said, her voice cool. I suggest we remind them why they quarantined us instead of finishing the job. The council was quiet again, but not from uncertainty. Earth had not been idle. Decades of covert militarization had birthed projects no ethical code would sanction. AI fleets buried beneath Martian ice. Dimensional warheads shelved because even theorizing their use triggered madness in lesser minds. Humanity hadn't prepared for peace. It had prepared for vengeance. Admiral Elen's voice cut in once more, projected into the council chamber. Authorization for Vanguard Black Echo requested. Commander Nyx Virell designated Primarch of Defense and Retaliation. Lin looked across the table. A soldier without a nation now speaks for our species. No, came Elen's answer. She is our nation. 2 hours later, the forward chambers in orbit roared to life. Nyx stood beneath the crucible of dark light. A synthetic antimatter stream stabilized into crystalline form. Her armor was not donned. It was grown around her. Memories of battle stitched into the nanofibers. Pain was calibrated into her nerves like fire into steel. When she reached a blade extended to her by the Forge Keeper, it hummed not with power, but with purpose. The weapon didn't glow. It devoured light, leaving only the afterimage of violet flame. Name it, the Keeper said. Nyx's grip tightened. It doesn't need a name. The galaxy will know it by what it leaves behind. Outside, the Varn fleet passed Neptune. Within the Requiem's war chamber, maps glowed across the curved ceiling. Vectors, fuel reserves, Enemy trajectory. It was a theater award disguised as order, and in the center stood Nyx, silent as ever, absorbing data like breath. A junior officer approached, eyes nervous. "Ma'am, the Varn have opened a transmission link. Visual, no language. On screen, the bridge dimmed, static cleared. And then, a single figure, 7 feet tall, skin like liquid bronze, framed by fractal geometry and a pulsing aura. No mouth moved, but a voice carved itself into minds of every human listening. You have not evolved, but you have defied. Nyx's eyes narrowed. We offered silence. You respond with noise. We will cleanse the echo. The feed cut. No one moved. Then Nyx turned to the room. We go dark. All channels locked. From this moment, Earth speaks with one voice, mine. Later, alone in her quarters, Nyx recorded a private message. Not for the Varn, not for the Council, but for history. I was born beneath concrete skies, in a sector that no longer exists. My blood isn't pure, nor is it even entirely human anymore. I am not a symbol. I am not a hero. I am proof that we adapt. We endure, and now we retaliate. The message was stored in the Arc Vault, encoded in all known galactic tongues. A warning, a prophecy. The following dawn, Earth's outer moon shimmered with activity. The first of the counterfleets launched in synchronized silence, like arrows loose from a dying world. At their head flew the vigilant Requiem, engines ablaze, and at its helm Nyx, face unreadable, purpose absolute. Above her, the stars awaited, and far beyond them, something watched. The first engagement began without sound. Space, always quiet, became deathly still in the orbit of Saturn. The Varn fleet arrived in perfect formation. 13 vessels of obsidian alloy, shaped like blades, each 3 kilometers in length. They emitted no signals, no transmissions, no challenge. Their message was in their presence. A judgment. Commander Nyx Virell stood at the helm of the vigilant Requiem, her stance rigid, her voice calm over the neural command channel. Target primary drive cores. Pattern Delta 7. On my mark. Behind her, 100 officers moved in orchestrated precision. The ship's AI Oracle 9 hummed low in her neural feed. Feeding her were predictive vectors, enemy movement probabilities, and casualty simulations. She dismissed the latter. Numbers didn't win wars. Intent did. The first volley left Earth's fleet before the Varn had fired a shot. Beam lances and magnetic torpedoes streaked across the void. The leading Varn cruiser shimmered and phase-shifted out of alignment, but not fast enough. 2 torpedoes slammed into its underside, breaching its plasma containment and igniting a white nova that lit the rings of Saturn. Cheers erupted on one of the rear Earth vessels. Nyx silenced them. 1 dead. 12 more coming. The Varn responded. Space warped. Their retaliation wasn't loud. It was impossible. 4 Earth ships blinked out of existence, not from explosion, but erasure. Quantum disassembly. The Varn weapons bypassed shields, armor, time. Nyx felt her heartbeat slow, regulated by her bio-augment systems. But her mind raced. If they could erase matter at will, no, there had to be a limit. There always was. They wouldn't be here if they could destroy from afar. They wanted proximity. Witnesses. Fear. Reform wedge formation. Focus fire on their left flank. Draw them into Saturn's gravity well. We're not trying to win. We're trying to bleed them. The fleet obeyed, engines flaring. Nyx's mind operated in microbursts of calculated fury. Her movements were calm, but inside, a storm of strategy formed. She didn't need to win the battle. She needed the Varn to underestimate her. While the battle above Saturn raged, Project Lazarus awakened below Mars. Buried beneath the rust-red dunes were 37 automated war hulks, colossal machines with minds built from fractured AI networks. Unstable but deadly. They had been deemed too unpredictable, too dangerous. But desperation had stripped Earth of its caution. The Lazarus Protocol was initiated with one phrase. Rise, children of the forgotten. On the Martian surface, the ground shattered. Metallic titans climbed from ancient tombs, eyes glowing, plasma limbs flexing. Their directive was clear. Intercept the Varn's second wave approaching from the Kuiper Belt. They would not stop. They would not question. They would not survive. Back at Saturn, the vigilant Requiem took a glancing hit that tore a hole the size of a carrier in its lower decks. Fire control systems sealed the breach, but not before 36 crew were lost to vacuum. Nyx didn't flinch. She moved through smoke and strobing lights, issuing orders, directing fire. Redirect power from rear thrusters to the Singularity cannon. Target their command vessel. A hesitation. Then Oracle 9 answered. Charging. 10 seconds. The Varn flagship loomed ahead, its surface rippling with active shields. Nyx narrowed her eyes. Now! The Singularity cannon fired, a compressed mass of artificial gravity wrapped in polarized plasma. It tore through the void like a star collapsing in fast forward. The Varn tried to phase, but the shot anticipated them. The sphere impacted, and space itself screamed. The flagship folded inward, not destroyed but consumed. Its death was less an explosion and more an absence, a blind spot in the cosmos. For a moment, the Varn formation hesitated. Nyx saw it. Broadcast open channel, she ordered. The channel blinked green. This is Commander Nyx Virell of Earth. We see you. We defy you. This is not a plea. This is a warning. She paused, then added with razor calm, You should have finished us when you had the chance. The message was broadcast across known sectors, piggyback on ancient beacons once used for trade. It was picked up in fringe systems, on mining colonies, even on planets still under Varn control. For many, it was the first voice of defiance they had ever heard. Some wept, others rose. On Varn Prime, the High Caste reviewed the footage. They did not speak. Emotion was alien to them, but calculations were not. Humanity had destroyed one of their command vessels, resisted quantum erasure, and rallied others with mere words. The elders conferred in tones that bent the logic of language. Earth had become a variable. Nyx returned to Earth orbit with only 4 ships intact from her squadron. Blood loss pulsed behind her eyes, but she refused sedation. As she walked to the halls of the vigilant Requiem, crew members stood in silence. No salutes, just recognition. Back on Earth, cities that once lay dormant under the weight of fear lit up. The footage of Saturn's battle played on screens from New Tokyo to the Cairo spires. Children born after the quarantine had never seen a battle won. Now they had, not through overwhelming strength, but grit. Nyx stood once more before the council, this time alone. No officers, no preamble. The Varn will escalate, she said. We've shown them pain. Now, they'll show us what they're willing to lose. Chancellor Lin's face was pale. And what are we willing to lose? Nyx's expression didn't change. Everything. That night, she sat beneath the stars, not in armor, but a simple environmental suit. The stars shimmered above, familiar and yet uncaring. A faint sound echoed in her neural implant. A voice. Not human. You speak loudly for a species so young. Nyx didn't react outwardly. Who are you? A listener. An enemy of your enemy. She frowned. Why now? Because the Varn are not your true threat, and soon they won't be anyone's. The voice vanished. The stars remained, and deep in the darkness, something else had begun to stir. The rain on Europa was not rain at all, but a constant whisper of frozen crystals settling across the moon's artificial domes. Beneath that icy veil, in the excavation chambers of Port Juno, Dr. Saria Elen pressed her trembling hands against a console that hadn't responded in over 100 years. Dust, real dust, not the microfrost of outer systems, clung to her gloves. It felt ancient, heavy with secrets. Try the ignition subroutine again, she muttered, voice low. Her assistant, a wiry tech named Remin, hesitated. We've already pushed it through 3 cycles. If we force it again, it might. I said again. He nodded, tapped the command into the worn keys. The panel hissed, then flickered. A slow pulse of amber light crawled across the control array. A sound, like distant thunder rolling through steel veins, echoed beneath their feet. Saria didn't breathe. It's waking up. The buried structure beneath Europa's crust was not Varn. It was older, older than the Martian war hulks, older than the first lunar colonies. Some had called it a myth, others a dead technology. But now, as its systems reawakened, something deep within its heart responded, not with language, not with light, but with awareness. Elsewhere in Earth's high orbit, Nyx Virell stood aboard the newly commissioned Resolute Dawn, the first human vessel to incorporate reverse-engineered Varn tech. Sleeker, faster, terrifying. She'd been offered a choice, to command from afar or to lead again. She never even considered the alternative. A new fleet was forming, not just from Earth, but from resistance cells scattered across the galaxy. Former colonies, abandoned stations, rogue planets that had never bowed to Varn but had long suffered their silence. Each sent what they could: ships, fighters, data, even weapons forged from salvage horrors. Unity was still fragile, but defiance was now contagious. Any word from Europa? Nyx asked, seated in the command chamber surrounded by tactical holocharts. Her new communications officer, an ex-mercenary named Talos, nodded. Dr. Elen reports activation, but she says it's not a weapon. It's more like a key. Nyx stood, gaze narrowing. A key to what? They don't know. Yet. Silence filled the chamber. Outside the viewport, Jupiter loomed like a wounded god, its red eye watching. Meanwhile, back beneath Europa's crust, the floor panels of the ancient structure shifted. What had once been a solid floor became transparent. Saria looked down and saw it, not machinery, but a being, encased in a prism of amber light, suspended in time. It was humanoid, or had been, features eroded by time, armor fused with its flesh, its hands clutching a sphere that pulsed in unison with her own heartbeat. Remin stepped back. What the hell is that? Saria didn't speak. She stepped closer, drawn not by curiosity, but instinct. This wasn't made by us, she whispered. And it wasn't made by them either. The prism cracked, soundlessly. Ice hissed and melted, and the sphere in the creature's hands began to rise, floating toward her. It shimmered, displaying symbols in a language she didn't recognize, but somehow understood. Warning, inheritance, choice. The moment her fingers brushed the sphere, her mind ruptured. She saw 1,000 worlds burned by something unseen. Not the Varn. Something behind them. Something they had once tried to escape. Something that devoured galaxies not for conquest, but for silence. The Varn had once been victims. When she came to, she was on the floor. The chamber had gone dark. The prism was empty. The being was gone. In the control room above, alarms blared. Remin's voice cut through the panic. Multiple energy signatures inbound from outside the Europa system. 3, no for vessels. Varn design, fast. Saria stood, wiping blood from her nose. They know. They felt it wake. She reached for the console. The sphere floated beside her, like a loyal dog. We have to get this to Nyx. Back aboard the Resolute Dawn, the crew scrambled as reports came in. Varn ships closing fast, moving with uncharacteristic desperation. Not their usual surgical assault. This was erratic, reckless. They're not trying to destroy Europa, Nyx said slowly, analyzing the paths. They're trying to reach it. Before we do, orders? Talos asked. Intercept. Protect the scientists. Prioritize the artifact. And beneath that command, unspoken, was another truth. If the Varn were afraid of what was awakening beneath Europa, then it had to be important. Maybe even essential. In the dark, things older than history were shifting. The Europa strike was violent and brief. Earth ships engaged a Varn just outside the moon's orbit, forcing them into chaotic dogfights among the frozen geysers. The Resolute Dawn tore through 2 cruisers before taking a direct hit to its lower decks. Nyx led the boarding team herself, breaching the Europa Lab facility where Saria was holding the artifact. They met amid fire and smoke, the sphere pulsing brighter between them. I know what this is, Saria gasped, handing it to her. It's not just a key. It's an invitation. Nyx held it. The sphere felt warm. Alive. To what? To something older than the Varn. Something watching. Something that heard us when we warned the galaxy. For a brief moment, the sphere projected a star map, unfamiliar coordinates far outside known systems. It pulsed 3 times, then dimmed. "That's where it wants us to go," Saria said. "It's where the war really started." The base shook again. A final Varn detachment breached the lower levels, unleashing swarms of nanite warriors, black metal serpents with razor mouths. Nyx turned, sword in hand, and met them head-on. The artifact was secured. The route was chosen. But the war was no longer just survival. It had become a reckoning. The journey to the coordinates revealed by the artifact took 13 standard days through warp corridors that bent light and twisted thought. Beyond the rim of the known galaxy, space grew strange. Stars no longer twinkled, they shimmered, as if viewed through a translucent membrane. Time staggered, stuttered. Half the crew of the Resolute Dawn reported dreams they couldn't explain. Visions of great structures coiled in shadow, voices that sang in languages older than matter. Nyx Virell didn't dream. She studied. Every hour she spent poring over the data siphoned from the sphere, cross-referencing ancient Varn records and recovered transmissions from fallen colonies. The deeper she dug, the more the same names surfaced, whispered across epochs and species. The Shroud. No clear image existed, only interpretations. Vast fields of black where stars vanished, systems erased from collective memory. The Varn had once fought it, and lost. Whatever the artifact was, it was part of a containment system meant not to destroy the Shroud, but to delay it. She stood now at the observation deck, watching as the ship breached the final coordinates. What they found was not a system. It was a graveyard. Hundreds of vessels drifted in a loose halo around a collapsed star, their hulls unmarked but lifeless. Some bore Earth-like designs from lost expeditions. Others, clearly Varn. A few were completely alien, shapes not meant for human eyes, angles that defied geometry. In the center floated a single object, a black obelisk larger than any capital ship, featureless except for a slow ripple across its surface, like a breath. Saria Elen stood beside Nyx, the artifact clutched in her arms. "It's calling to it," she whispered. The sphere emitted a low thrum, a sound felt more than heard. Talos' voice crackled through the comms. "Scans show 0 power signatures. Nothing's moving." "That doesn't mean it's dead," Nyx replied. They launched a reconnaissance drone. It didn't survive 5 seconds. As the drone neared the obelisk, it simply ceased. No explosion, no EMP. It vanished. One frame it was there. The next gone. "Something's protecting it," Saria said. "A temporal phase net, maybe, or something beyond even that. Can we get through?" "No." Nyx nodded slowly, then turned to the artifact. "But it can." When the artifact was placed at the edge of the bridge, facing the obelisk, it flared. The ship's systems dimmed. Gravity pulsed. The obelisk responded, not violently, but gently. A seam opened in its side, revealing a tunnel of liquid dark, beckoning. Everyone hesitated. Nyx didn't. She turned to her hand-picked team, Saria, Talos, and a silent android tactician called Delta V whom they recovered from a derelict Varn lab. Each nodded, one by one. They boarded a dropship and entered. Inside the obelisk, there was no floor, no ceiling, just space twisted into a labyrinth of light and shadow. The walls seemed to watch them, shifting in ways their eyes couldn't track. Voices drifted in and out, some familiar, others entirely alien. "Is this a structure or a being?" Talos asked. Saria answered. "Both. Maybe neither." Delta V paused, one hand raised. Movement. From the dark emerged the last thing they expected. A human. She wore no suit. Her skin glowed faintly, her eyes pure white. She hovered inches off the ground, a smile not quite human curving her lips. "You came," she said. "At last." Nyx raised her weapon. "Identify." "I am what remains of Commander Lura Ash," the woman replied. "Last of the Arclight expedition. We were the first to reach this place. We were not the first to die." Saria gasped. "That was over a century ago." "You're alive?" "Not really." Time doesn't pass here as it does outside. We became part of the architecture, not prisoners. Not entirely. Nyx lowered her weapon slightly. What is a shroud? Ash's expression turned somber. A mistake. A hunger. It was born from a civilization so advanced it consumed its own dimension, folding itself inward in pursuit of purity. Now it drifts across realities, absorbing thought, memory, history. The Varn were the last to try to contain it. This structure is their tomb and their prison. Saria stepped forward. The artifact is a key. To release it, to warn the next sentience, to offer a choice. Ash turned to Nyx. You brought it. That means Earth is ready to choose. A hum rose in the air. The shadows peeled back. A door opened, not to another room, but to a vision. They saw it, the Shroud, a blackness that moved not with speed, but with certainty. It consumed not matter, but identity. Whole civilizations blinked out of continuity. The Varn hadn't conquered worlds to dominate them, but to isolate the Shroud's advance, trying to slow its crawl by severing connections between thinking species. They had failed. Ash turned. The choice is this. Flee to isolation like the Varn tried. Let Earth become another fortress in the dark. Or unify what remains of the galaxy. Ignite resistance not of weapons, but of memory, culture, chaos. Everything the Shroud cannot digest. Nyx looked into the void, then back to her team. We fight. Saria's eyes widened. We can't fight it directly. We don't. Nyx said, we make ourselves too complex to consume. Ash nodded. Then take the memory, take the knowledge, and run. Because now that it knows you've seen it, it's coming. The structure began to collapse, not with violence, but with purpose. The dropship launched just as the obelisk folded on itself, fading into a point of singularity that snapped and was gone. Back on the Resolute Dawn, the artifact dissolved in Nyx's hands. In its place, a network of coordinates appeared. Places of resistance, species the Shroud had overlooked, forgotten caches of history and technology. She turned to her bridge crew. Transmit to every allied system, every fringe colony, every mind still free. The war doesn't begin when they arrive. It begins now. And far beyond the edge of known space, in a place without stars, the Shroud stirred. It had heard the warning. It would answer. But this time, humanity was ready.